What is up, everybody? Hopefully, you're having a fantastic evening, and hopefully, it's going to get better because, I got Marco here. He's pretty entertaining himself, but we got to talk about this Waddle deal and how it impacts Brandon Aiyuk. Hargrave says he was a bit out of shape last year. We got an interesting perspective from Bleacher Report. And you know what's funny is I did a show on Tuesday and it included something about Bleacher Report, and people are like, "Oh, it's not even reputable." Who cares? Like, it's a good starting point as far as a conversation goes. I love what they did. They redid the draft 2020 through 2024 and what players you would take. I think on the surface, it sounds great for Purdy, but when you dug a little bit deeper, not so great. I want to talk a little bit about George Kittle and his injury, and then we're going to get into roster evaluation. We're going to talk about those things plus more, and we're going to do it next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's Thursday, which means I got my guy Marco in the building. What's up, Marco?
What up? What up? How's it going, man?
Good, man. You notice no accents. I didn't try to give you the wrestler entrance. I just
casual.
Said it to you. Never. You know what?
I'm probably falling down.
I'm not even going to say what I was going to say.
Yeah, it was going to be a very big pause moment. I understand.
It was. Yeah, you know where I was going. Where I was going with that one, but we'll stop before we have to even say it. Glad you're doing okay. Love the background. Love the ambiance. What's up, Chad? I see Brother Bob in here. He's like, "Oh, I bet you Jesse's gonna be late." I wasn't. It was on time, just so you know. Perfectly on time. All right, Marco. It seems like every single time I'm about to do a show or a night that I have a show, the Brandon Aiyuk situation just keeps popping up, and not because anything. This is the nice thing about it. It's not like it's anything that Brandon Aiyuk is doing to cause it. He's not going about it and having any drama. The team's not really causing any drama. But every single day, it seems like another receiver is getting big time money. Today, that receiver was Jaylen Waddle. Dude, first of all, can I ask you this before we get into Brandon Aiyuk? Do you like the 49ers strategy? Because I posted immediately, oh, looks like the dollar value just keeps going up. The more you wait, the worse this gets. And everybody, of course, comes to the 49ers defense and is like, well, I mean, what do you expect him to do? And if he's got a good agent, then there's no way his agent's going to let him sign. And my rebuttal to that is, listen, unless every player for the 49ers just happens to have the best agent in the world that's always like, let's wait till the bitter end. At some point, you have to acknowledge this is a 49er doing. So do you agree with the way that the 49ers handle their contract situations or their negotiations with their big-time players?
Not one bit, man. We could go back to George Kittle, Fred Warner. People forget Fred Warner was like requesting a trade. Like, people forget that he was going public and having his inner circle say stuff publicly. Fred Warner's dad publicly tweeted stuff that he didn't like how the contract negotiations were going on. We saw last year with Deebo Samuel. What's weird is the players that should have gotten their money up front right away didn't, right? But a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo at the time, who played 5 games, got his money like that. Like, right away, they extended him. It was really just, to me, like, it doesn't make sense with this organization in terms of you're letting your players get more expensive as they go. And I guess that's cool if you're in the market of paying your players to be the highest paid players no matter what. But in the terms of roster construction, it's kind of shoots yourself in the foot in terms of the Niners are constantly overpaying players. For example, Deebo Samuel, and now they're in a situation where his contract doesn't look right. Nick Bosa's, they waited so long with Nick Bosa's contract that if you look at the defensive ends, he's paid by like $5 million more than the next highest paid dude. So, like, to me, that kind of stuff just blows my mind in terms of how they do their roster construction in terms of when they decide to pay players. confusing. I don't get it. Now I understand in a player perspective, you want to wait, but also an agent's not going to tell a player, "Hey, let's hold off on this deal. You're going to get this much guarantee." Like they're not going to do that. If you're getting a fair contract, an agent's not going to say, "Hey, hold off." We've seen so many players get extended, so many receivers this offseason get extended, and none of them are playing the waiting game. Those teams are getting ahead of the curve to pay their player earlier because they know that price range is going to keep going up every other contract. So it's just very confusing why the Niners are doing it how they do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I get it from some point. I remember 2 seasons ago, Grant and I were doing a show, and he's like, if the 49ers were smart, they would just sign Nick Bosa early. And I said, yeah, I agree. But I'm going to tell you one thing. I know just based off of what you've seen from the Bosas, there is no way Bosa is going to sign a contract. He's going to bet on himself. That's how they do business. You're not going to be able to sign him early. He wants the full bag, and he knows if he plays great this year, and he ended up doing that, he'll get paid. So I do understand that there are some players and some agents that do go about their business that way. I'm not oblivious to that, but there's no way that you can sell me that Fred Warner, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, all guys that publicly showed frustration, Brandon Aiyuk, are those same guys that are like, yeah, let's just hold out. And their agent's like, yeah, let's hold out till the bitter end. I just don't see it that way. This is the 49ers doing for the most part outside of Bosa and maybe, another player or two. But the 49ers are choosing to do business this way. And somebody, I think it was on Grant's show, and I wish I could remember who it was. I would love to give him credit, said something along the lines of, what are the 49ers gaining? Because at best, they're saving themselves minimal amount of money. At worst, they're pissing off their star players and still paying them. So what's the point? And you're letting them sit out through training camp and carry on. And even Bosa, the guy, if there's anybody you can trust to come in as close to football shape as possible, he is living proof that it is impossible to be in true football shape away from training camp and away from the team. And that is a guy that trains like a madman. So if he can't come in and be football ready, then why the hell would anybody else be able to do it? It's not a good look year after year after year after year when you're trying to win a Super Bowl, but you're holding out your best players, knowing you're going to sign them anyways. And then they come in and can't contribute the way that they need to in order for you to win that Super Bowl. It's just weird to me.
No, exactly. And you mentioned Bosa, like he publicly said it. We saw Deebo Samuel coming out of shape. So it's it's not just Bosa. We saw Deebo come in heavy and having to run around with Wes Welker to try to get in shape after that contract situation going on. So just very interesting. I don't think Brandon Aiyuk will be a guy that comes in out of shape. I think he's a true pro. And it's different for.
But Bosa didn't come. Hold on, but Bosa didn't come in out of shape either. But there's a difference. You can be in elite shape, but you're not football hardened and ready to go. That is a different ball game.
But I would say it's different between a defensive lineman versus a receiver in the sense of the receivers aren't really banging or getting super physical with each other at the line of scrimmage. Bosa needed those reps because it's a different style of rep in terms of you can condition all you want, but for the most part, receivers, they're not going to be getting banged, tossed around in the trenches and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different shape. So I think he'll come in the right shape that he needs to be in order to be having a successful season. I don't think he's going to be like Deebo Samuel coming overweight, looking extra thick during training camp.
With 2 C's. Okay, so Jaylen Waddle got a deal today. It's interesting that the Dolphins took the same route that the Eagles did and paying Waddle a year early, much like Devontae Smith got his deal. You love it for those teams because that shows that they have the foresight to say, hey, we know we want this player here long term. We know that this market is only climbing. If we wait, if this player plays as good as they have the last couple seasons, and then we wait till next offseason and then we get another money hike, this thing's only going up. So let's sign him now. Let's save ourselves money a year early. I know, what a concept. So what does the Waddle deal do for Brandon Aiyuk and his negotiation?
I don't think it does much.
Okay.
And when I looked at the contract, I know we looked at the numbers that initially came out were like 75 million full guaranteed, right? But the number, their total guarantees, but the number that is more important is the fully guaranteed money, right? That's only 35.9. So if you look at guys, it doesn't hit I believe he's like 10th ranked. So I could take a look 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's 11th in terms of total fully guaranteed money. And that's after guys who already have signed, right? So we've seen Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Nico Collins. He's ahead of them, but it's not by much. We saw Amon-Ra St. Brown get that mega contract, but his fully guaranteed number is only 34.7. And what this is we saw these players who got the higher APY, which is the average per year salary. They got the higher APY, but when you look at their true numbers for a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Smith, everyone, oh my God, those guys got cashed out. They truly didn't, because you look at their fully guaranteed, it's very low compared to guys like AJ Brown, Calvin Ridley, Jerry Jeudy, Michael Pittman, and then Tyreek Hill is at the highest with the 52 million fully guaranteed. So I don't think it really changes the numbers for a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, because we know Brandon Aiyuk is gonna get his APY. If he wants that 30, okay, cool. Give him the 30 years, 30 million per year. But what that's gonna do is, okay, now your fully guaranteed money is gonna come down. Your totals is gonna be there with those same guys, but what the more important number is the one that's fully guaranteed, where over the course of his contract, can they get off of that fully guaranteed money? And that's what a lot of teams allow in negotiations. Do you want AP? You want to be the guy where you could puff your chest and say, hey, I got more average per year? That's cool. Well, your fully guaranteed money is gone. And when you look at Waddles' contract, he may not see the 31 million cap hit that he has in his final year, because it's an out year that year. And I believe they saved 21 million of it. So there's a big difference in terms of the fully guaranteed and the total guarantees. I believe the way it was explained to me, I know Kendrick Lamar asked what's the difference of a guaranteed versus fully. Jess, you may be able to explain this easier than me. The way I was told was fully guaranteed money is what you get up front. Like, no matter what happens, that's what you're going to get. Total is if you get injured in the future, that's what you get. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, here we go. Let's see if we can find a good definition. That's the way that I understand it as well. But we'll read it right here. This is straight from NFL. Even if you're firmly aware that guarantees are the most important in an NFL contract, there's another layer to them that needs to be understood. Hold on. Let's get to another example. Left tackle Trent Williams. Oh, perfect. Signed a record-setting deal with the 49ers earlier this week. It was presented like this. Trent Williams would get $138 million. Included is $55 million guaranteed and $30 million signing bonus. Do the quick math on your phone's calculator. It's a deal with an average annual value of $23 million, the highest average annual value for a tackle. Then your eyes move to the guaranteed, and the $55 million is a massive guaranteed front. However, not all guarantees are created equal. While there's been improvement on this front in recent years, in most cases, a new contract for an NFL player is initially reported with total guarantees included in the deal. Those consist of money guaranteed the instant the contract is signed, with guarantees that could be available in future if that player is on the roster. So there you go. It's exactly what you said, which is there's a fully guaranteed, which is what you're getting at signing. And if you're on the roster for those future years, there is more guaranteed money that will happen. So that's when you hear like, oh, you know, if this team has to make a decision on X player before the new league year starts, because if they don't, they're going to be on the hook for X amount of money. That is that future guaranteed, the non-fully guaranteed that they're referring to. So
absolutely. And then even like, so when you look at Spot Rack, they broke it down in terms of Jaylen Waddles' contract, right? So he got 35.9 guaranteed at signing. So when you look at his cap numbers, 2024 it's to 9 million, 2025, 26, and 27. So they included the 2025 fifth year option on that contract, because it's essentially a 4-year, $77.3 million in practical money that it's new. So they picked up that fifth year and then extended him for 3 years. But when you look at it, his cap numbers for 2025 through 2027 are 19.9, 21, and 27.7. And that 2028 year, it's at the 31.1. But that's when they have an out. So when you look at the numbers, the Niners could do that kind of contract for Brandon Aiyuk all day, every day. Okay, you want to look like you got paid? Cool. We're saving money on the fully guaranteed money end. And I think that's what the Niners could possibly be doing, or what Brandon Aiyuk may want. So it's a tug of war, right? Okay, you want average per year? Well, we want to give you less guaranteed money, and that's what happened with some of these players recently.
Let me try to put this in layman's terms, or like terms of what we do here, which is like YouTube content, right? The average annual value is your subs. Right? Everybody looks at subs and it's like, oh my gosh, so-and-so has X amount of subs. They must be thriving. But what we look at here, what we care about is the guarantees, right? And the guarantees are the views per show. So if I put out a show and I'm getting 600 views on it and I got 40,000 subs, and this guy over here has 20,000 subs and is putting out 3,000 views, 4,000, 5,000 views, whose channel's thriving more? Yes, he has more subs. He has the more annual value, but I'm getting the guarantees, right? And so that is how that I would look at it from like what we do. So it's just another way to try to explain it. Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, we'll see what happens with Brandon Aiyuk. Actually, I'm just gonna ask you. I've been asking everybody this week, so I might as well ask you the same thing. Does Brandon Aiyuk enter week 1 with a new deal in hand, in your opinion?
Yeah. I think he gets a new deal. I think he does. Yeah. When you look at it, right, and I've been saying it since the combine, I had heard that the Niners don't have any plans to have Debo in their future. We just saw Debo potentially get traded. We've heard Matt Mayoko mention it. Debo Samuel may be the odd man out, or Brandon Aiyuk may. But when you look at it, I truly believe Debo Samuel is the odd man out coming next year, and I think he'll be moved after this year. So I think you do get a contract done with Brandon Aiyuk, because all it does for the 49ers, if they get a contract done, is it lowers his cap number this year potentially, or you could even restructure it a certain way where you could have Demo on your roster next year and get him extended. So a lot of things, it benefits the Niners to extend BA. So I definitely see BA getting a contract extension, and then they'll figure the rest out next year with the Debo Samuel situation.
Yeah, I agree. I think I really genuinely could see a situation where this one is different and it does carry into the season. I genuinely could see that. And the only reason that I say that is because I feel like, and you tell me if I'm on base here or I'm off, but the way I remember it going down is Amon-Ra St. Brown's deal broke the day before the draft. Okay. The 49ers at that point had no intention of trading Aiyuk, although they were going to listen. You always listen. Smart teams, you always listen. It doesn't mean you're going to pull the trigger or want to pull the trigger. So they don't trade him. They go through their draft process. They have a number from Aiyuk and his agent, because remember, they had started negotiations prior to that. They said they were going to, and then they said that they were going to pick him up again after the draft, assuming he was on the roster, what have you. So they go into the draft with one number. Then they come out of the draft and Aiyuk and his agent are like, yesterday's price is not today's price. We got a new number. Thank you, Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then right after that, AJ Brown. So do you believe that it's possible that there was a number, they went into the draft with this number in mind, and then came out of the draft, resumed negotiations, and all of a sudden that number might have changed? And now they're like, okay, well, we still want to get the deal done, but this is not at all what we expected. We didn't expect to get to this number. How do we work this deal? And so that continues to add on to what might be going on here.
Yeah, I think they could have came to a different number, right? At this point, like, oh no, like we can't fit this in our contracts. We weren't expecting this. You initially told us this, and now the new number that you're presenting is this, and we can't do that. They could be at that, and if they are at that, that's terrible negotiations from the 49ers perspective, because you knew all along how many players were going to eventually get paid within the next few years. And then the fact that you waited all this long when you could have been ahead of the curve, got it done right after the season, and said, hey, you know what? Let's roll into the draft without any contract negotiations to worry about. They essentially did this to themselves.
Yeah, certainly. Let's get to some of these supers real quick. We got Dave and Brother Bob talking crap about me through the super chats. Dave says, "What's up, Jesse?" And the all-time clutch Marco. I see my boy Brother Bob is in the chat. What we talking about tonight? JJ, slot receivers. Let's get after it. We appreciate you guys. Thank you, Dave. And then he says, Jimmy sucks. Trade Kyle. He then follows it up and says, Niners try to haggle too much, then sign earlier. And then Brother Bob says, Dave, my brother, I'm just happy Nails is not late again. I knew it. I knew it was on his mind. And then Dave says, for once, Brother Bob, on time as never.
I think for the most part, every Thursday we've been on time, so they can't be talking about on Thursdays.
I think we're good. Brother Bob says, Dave, damn, you're brutal, but true per usual. And then Dave says, I'll always be honest. Doesn't change my love for him. And then it says, of course, I'm kidding. Jesse isn't late often. And he says, this is guaranteed. Here's $2. I got Michael coming in. I wanted to start this. So he says, I've always wondered how it works with YouTube, not paid per sub, but paid per view pretty much. But subs get your content prioritized more often. Yes and no. So you are not paid at all per sub. But again, that's what everybody celebrates. That's what everybody talks about. Your content doesn't get prioritized based off the subs. But what happens is your content, if I post a video right now, that video is going to first go to the people that sub to the channel. Based off of how that video is received by the people that sub to the channel, that will determine how many more people see it. And then when that next group comes in, depending on how it's received by them, so forth and so on. So a video can die on the vine very quickly if it doesn't receive the views from that first group, which is your subs, and then the second, third group, what have you. Or it could do really well. There are times where a video comes out, people that are sub to the channel are really into it, and then it just goes crazy like wildfire. So that's ultimately how it works. Now you're privy to the game. And Brother Bob says, wonder if it helps that Grant and Ryan's views increase. Wonder if I help Grant and Ryan's views increase. Is that, because you're on the show? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Hey, Brother Bob, I got to know this. You know what? I like that you're doing these shows with these guys. You know why? Because now I'm going to be looking to see if you're late. Yep. I'm going to start holding you accountable. If you're late, and I know you will be, especially going on with Grant, like that's almost a guarantee. Coming for you, Brother Bob. Coming for you. Right? You're not. It's funny when the comment creator passes over to the content creator side. I love it. All right, let's talk a little bit about Javon Hargrave, aka Jerome Hargrove, as Shannon Sharp calls him. So Hargrave comes out, asked about what he needs to do to contribute this year and what his thoughts are. And he talked about, which is interesting because again, I remember Grant talking about this last training camp and a lot of people were bagging on him for coming out and saying this. He said, I don't know, man. I don't know what Hargrave normally looks like. This is my first training camp with him. Seems to me he's out of shape. He's often on the sidelines. He's often taking breathers. He looks out of shape to me. People killed him. Well, Hargrave came out and verified that and said he was out of shape last year. And just the running defense or run defense and everything will be helped by him being in shape this year. I got to say this, Marco, this one baffles me because this is someone who came to a new team. You talk about just life in general. You want to make first impressions. You would think coming to a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, that they're all there during OTAs. And I look back, he was actually one of the few that did miss OTAs last year, but they were all there during OTAs and they're all on this Super Bowl or bust mission. And you come to the new team and you're out of shape. That is so frustrating to hear a year later as a fan. It's like, man, what if you were in shape? Would that have been enough to put him over the top? It just, I don't know, man. That one really, really, like that's the one thing you can control. You can't control injury. You can't control the guy across from you. Maybe sometimes they just play better than you and you don't have a good day. Things happen. I get it. You can't control the scheme for the day and how the coach wants to run things. And maybe they don't put you in the best positions. But what you can control is your effort and what you put forth and being in shape. Control your controllables and everything will fall into place the way that it should. The fact that he wasn't controlling his controllables as a 30-year-old veteran that just got a massive deal to come to this Super Bowl ready team, for me as a fan, very, very frustrating to hear. What are your thoughts on it?
No, I absolutely agree. I thought it was interesting when the Niners did want to sign Javon Hargrave, right? I didn't like the contract that they had given him, but also didn't like that they were going for a pass rushing specialist, but a guy who wasn't a good run defender and expecting him to be a 3-down lineman. I thought that was going to be bad for the defensive line. Obviously, we saw the defensive line took a hit in the run game, obviously because Armstead was out, but also Hargrave isn't that guy to replace him. But when you come into a new team and you're out of shape, to me, what that tells you is you were so content when you got paid the $40 million guaranteed at signing that you're like, you know what, I'm good enough with this. It also could be that the Eagles I talked about this a little bit yesterday, and someone in the comments said that the Eagles don't practice on any Wednesday, no matter what, throughout the year. So maybe him practicing throughout on Wednesdays affected that for him. But definitely isn't great from a veteran perspective. I know people are like, oh, well, he's coming to a new organization. Maybe he means he's not in 49er shape. He was with two really good organizations. It's not like he's coming from a down on the very bottom of the franchise organizations who are picking near the top 10 every year. He was with the Pittsburgh Steelers and then the Philadelphia Eagles, two organizations that are ran really well. And the fact that he was out of shape last year is very, very concerning. Now,
and he was coming off his most productive season as a pass rusher. 30 years old, he knows what it takes to win in this league and be in shape. Like, I don't want to hear that excuse.
Absolutely, but he's also what I was trying to explain to someone too yesterday was he's also needs to be in shape because he's essentially in a contract year. If we want to be honest, like that, even though his contract got restructured, we saw that last year with Armstead, and then they eventually cut him post June 1st. So next year, if they were like, you know what, we're gonna cut him post June 1st, they eat $7 million in dead cap, they save 20, and then the following 2026 they would eat money, but essentially he's in a contract year. Because if the Niners do cut him and he has a bad year because he's out of shape or he doesn't produce, there's not going to be another team that pays him a big contract like Armstead got. So he's in a contract year. He understands what that stake. So now he decides, like, you know what? I need to be in shape. To be honest, that to me is very concerning that that's what it takes for a player to come into shape.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, you had Debo the year before coming out of shape. You had Hargrave this year, and those are just players that you know of, right? It just super, super frustrating, man. And I know that every team has a guy or two, right? You hear it all the time. It's like, well, so-and-so showed up overweight. Like, this isn't a big surprise, but you hear Logan Ryan go on with Cowherd, and he talks about, man, I'll tell you what, when I showed up, they were all in the weight room and made it sound like they just got this special thing going on in San Francisco. And I'm sure they do, but they're not the only team that has it. But when you hear that, and then you a day or two later hear that a big time player on the team is out of shape, it's like, okay, well, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's great that 30 people were in the weight room, and that's reminds you of your Patriots days, but you did have a big time player that they absolutely needed to rely on last year that was not in shape. And that's at his own admission. So I don't know, man. Like I said, this is more of a topic from the fan side and just like the emotional side of like, dude, what the F, man? You guys were this close to winning a Super Bowl. Like, every inch matters throughout the season. Could they have won if you were in better shape? I don't know. I'm not putting the Super Bowl on him or anything like that, but it's weird to me to hear that for a team that was so focused on trying to win a Super Bowl and a guy that just got paid. And it's not like he was in a situation like Bosa where he was fighting for his first time payday and then had to wait until the bitter end. He got paid immediately before the actual free agency period started, but he didn't find time to get in shape. Like, what's going on, dude? What? I don't know. It's frustrating.
And I think what's more concerning about everything too is the fact that he's saying all this is he was probably one of the worst defensive linemen on the 49ers in the postseason. Like, that's to me where it's like when we want to talk about players coming in and coming out of shape or XYZ, I think that's the concerning part is throughout the postseason, he was probably one of the worst 49er defenders in terms of he was in the wrong spots, over pursuing, just didn't look like himself. And I think that's what's more concerning is he was one of the worst players on defense, and he was one of the highest paid players on defense. And I think as a fan, you should be mad because it's coming in shape something that, like you said earlier, it's what they can control. Stuff that you can't control is not something we could get mad about. But like, come on, man, you're a professional. You're required to be in shape. You play a professional sport. What are we doing? Like, do you think he's in shape by him saying I was out of shape last year? Do you think he means he's out of shape because he's actually next to Nick Bosa and he saw how in shape Nick Bosa is and he feels like that is actually in shape and not what his in shape is?
Brother, no, because he played with rather some very, very good players, very good veterans over in Philly, lined up right next to for quite a while. One of the best defensive tackles of this era. Like, no, absolutely not. I mean, he was right. He played with Fletcher Cox, man. Fletcher Cox, like, you know what I mean? Fletcher Cox is like the cream of the crop. So no.
The reason why I ask is because yesterday someone asked, like, "Oh, is that something like? Is it more so because he's next to Bosa, where he feels like he's out of shape versus he actually might really be in shape?" But I thought the same thing. Like, being next to Bosa doesn't mean like you got to come in some different kind of shape. Like, you should have been in top shape anyways.
Yeah, okay. So Bosa wasn't in training camp, and it was like, oh, if Bosa would have been here. I mean, Bosa not getting signed not only made him be out of shape, but I was out of shape. What are you gonna do? Like, no, absolutely not. No, that one's weird. Brother Bob says makes you wonder why Kyle Levy didn't push Hargrave. Yeah, man, I don't. Those things to me are not on the coach as much. Those are players making those choices and those decisions. Like, you can talk to them, you can have the training staff do whatever, but if they're gonna away from the team, eat things that they shouldn't, or not train the way that they should, it's like, man, I don't even know. So, all right, let's talk about this draft with Brock Purdy. I thought this was a cool way of looking at it. There's so many ways to rank quarterbacks or whatever, but what Bleacher Report did was they took the 2020 through 2024 NFL draft, took all the players from that draft, put them back into the pool, and then kept their contracts and said, okay, if we had to redraft all those players today, what would the first round look like, essentially? And the way they did it was every player that was on the team before 2020 was still on the roster. And then they basically did NBA lottery style where they put ping pongs in based off of records and then pulled ping pongs out. And that's how they got the order of the teams. But here's what I will say on the surface sounds like good news. They had Brock Purdy ranked number 17 overall out of all the players drafted from 2020 to 2024. They had him going number 17, which, by the way, just on the surface, for a guy that was the last pick in the draft to be picked 17 out of 4 drafts is pretty phenomenal, right? But then you dig a little bit deeper and it's like, hold on a second. Well, I went from being like, yeah, okay, that's pretty cool, to I think he did him a little bit dirty here. So I'm not going to go through all the players that were drafted before him because, again, it's all positions. You had offensive lineman, everything. But here's the quarterbacks that were drafted before him. So with the first pick in the draft, CJ Stroud went. Okay, I understand it. Second pick in the draft was Joe Burrow. Now, on the surface, you may see that and go, wow, how is Stroud ahead of Burrow? Burrow's proven a little bit more. Again, your contract goes with you. So Burrow at this point has been paid. The team drafting him is taking on the money that he's already getting paid. Mm-hmm. So you have Stroud pick number 1, Burrow pick number 2, pick number 4, Herbert, pick number 7, Jordan Love, pick number 9, Caleb Williams, pick number 10, Jaden Daniels, pick number 11, Anthony Richardson. Pick number 13, Jalen Hurts. Pick number 14, Tua Tagovailoa. 17, Purdy. And then 20, they had Lawrence. That was the top 11 quarterbacks that were taken in that draft from 2020 to 2024. What do you think about this list? So just the guys taken above Purdy. Let's go through it and you tell me agree or disagree. CJ Stroud, agree or disagree? Okay.
Agree.
Burrow, agree or disagree?
Agree. But
Herbert.
I would say on Burrow, I would say the contract and the injury. You get the injury as well. So we don't know. We have not seen Burrow after the injury. So it's that one is like, oh, let me see Burrow before. But I get why if you're going off of a fully healthy Burrow, but the big contract and the injury, we don't know what he is. He could be completely buns after that injury.
He could.
So yeah, I would pause on that one in terms of like, let me see how healthy he really is before I do it. And this isn't. I know people are talking about this is not Sims. This is not the Sims
this
ranking
is not the
yet.
Sims one.
We'll get to that one in a bit. This is not the Sims. This is Bleacher Report doing a redraft from 2020 to 2024.
Yeah. Okay. Herbert.
Oh yeah, I'm taking Herbert.
Love.
Yeah, we've discussed this before. I'm taking Love over Brock.
Okay. Caleb Williams.
Yes, because of the potential and the contract.
Okay. Jaden Daniels.
Again, potential and contract.
Okay. Anthony Richardson.
My QB1 from last year. I'm taking him.
Okay. Jalen Hurts.
This is the one where I want to. This is the conversation that starts right here, right? Because Jalen Hurts, and I text you briefly about it. Like it's for me, I would take Jalen Hurts overall. Now, when I'm looking at both of the quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts' rush ability and be able to use his legs as much as he does is very valuable in the NFL. It breaks defenses' backs. Now, Jalen Hurts isn't as good of a passer as Brock Purdy, in my opinion. So when I look at the two, I'm taking Brock as a passer. I'm taking overall player. I'm taking Jalen Hurts. But also, what plays a major factor is we're taking contracts, right? So the Jalen Hurts contract isn't as bad as most people like to talk about. When you look at Jalen Hurts' contract, his cap numbers over the next 3 years aren't bad. This year's 13, next year's 21.7, 2026 is 31. And what he did in the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs with Mahomes, he had a hell of a Super Bowl. He was probably one of the better Super Bowl like performances from a quarterback trying to will his team to stay into the game. So I would take Hurts over, but it's not by a lot. It's very marginal. Where I would understand if you say, "Oh no, I'm definitely taking the Purdy." I understand why, because Purdy does give you the consistency to be a good quarterback and passing the ball. So I would take that. Also, what we saw from Jalen Hurts last year as a quarterback, we got to remember that the offensive coordinator they hired, going from Shane Steichen to Brian Johnson, was super terrible. Like watching their offense was very bad. So you have to factor that into it because he went from 22 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, and then his numbers last year skyrocketed in interceptions. So we'll see how that goes. But I would take Hurts and the contract because Purdy should get paid, and who knows what his cap numbers look like because I know he's going to get paid. We know he should get paid.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the getting paid part. I don't think Hurts is very good. And I remember doing a show last year with Fish and Larry, and this was like mid-season, and somehow Jalen Hurts came up, and I was like, I don't know. I think it was had to have been the week of the 49ers Eagles game. And I said, Hurts has to show me something. He's like, wow, really? I mean, year 3, and he played so great last year. Like, you're not sold on him? And I was like, no, because there was a lot in college to be desired. He finally picked it up that final year. Then he comes to the NFL. He has a couple down years. He has one great year and then another kind of middling year. I've seen more bad from him than I've seen good. I'm not saying that he's not good, but I'm not saying that he is definitively good either. Yes, I have my questions about Brock Purdy. I mean, that is no secret. I've made that very clear. But at least I've seen consistency from Brock. I would say if I just take the college career and the consistency, I would take Brock. And then when I get to the NFL, the consistency, I would take Brock. Now, yes, a lot of that can come from having a stable organization or a stable head coach and stable coaching staff. I understand all of those things, but Hurts to me, there's just there's more questions about him than Purdy, at least at this point. So for me, I would take Purdy over Hurts. Tua, I think we're going to agree on this one.
Yeah.
Absolutely, bro. Tua is. I get into it with Dolphins fans pretty regularly on Twitter. They genuinely think they have an elite quarterback in Miami. Some of these guys think he's better. They're like, oh, I mean, we're totally fine that we didn't take Herbert. Like, you're so full of crap. Tua is so buns to me. I don't see anything redeeming about his game at all. I don't watch him at all. And there's nothing about his game that excites me. He's not super mobile. He's undersized. He doesn't have arm strength. Frankly, I think he's a bad decision maker. I think he telegraphs and comes up with where he's going with the ball pre-snap, barely goes through his reads. I don't see any of the things. It's like he has all the bad things physically that Brock has with none of the good things. Brock, like physically and him physically are similar. But mentally, and then from an athletic standpoint and getting mobile, Brock is light years above Tua. There is no way. And Tua, by the way, is closer to getting paid than Brock. He's probably going to get paid this offseason. Not a chance in hell I'm taking Tua over Brock Purdy. Not even close or debatable, in my opinion.
I 100% agree. I think Tua is overrated. But I don't think Brock is that much better than Tua yet. If that makes sense. Like, now what I mean by that is,
but you can see the exactly. That's what I'm. You see the upside with Brock.
Okay. Yeah, like you could see the upside, but I don't think they're necessarily that much farther off from each other. And what I mean is I'm not trying to say this in a disrespectful manner, like on Brock, right? But like with Tua, they at least throw the ball a ton of times because that's how their offenses ran. So like he does throw the ball a lot more. So it's like for me,
he throws it downfield a lot too. He does throw downfield a lot.
So like for me, like you do see a different aspect from Tua. Like they attempted to pass the ball last year like 560 times. I don't even think Brock hit 500 last year. So it's like you're looking at that stuff too. Like that plays a factor in it too in terms of like a quarterback. Like you see more deficiencies than the positives. I don't think Tua's good. I would not pay him more than $30 million. Like I truly wouldn't. Like he's not that quarterback who's gonna win you games. So I get Brock over Tua, especially with the contract situations, because Brock's under a cheap contract technically for 2 more years. So I would definitely go Brock over Tua any day.
But what you can say from an argumentative standpoint, it's like for those that are like, oh, look at Purdy's numbers. Well, I can say the same thing about Tua. Like I go to the Tua the last 2 years and look at what he's produced. I mean, last year he led the league in passing. The year before, he led it in yards per attempt. He led it in quarterback rating. It's like all the things statistically Brock has done, he's also done. I watch the games. Tua is not that good. I'm sorry. He's just not that good at all. And he's never, ever shown up big time in a big time game or a big time moment. At least Brock, listen, I understand that his numbers dipped in the playoffs, but there were moments during big time pressure situations that you saw him perform. Like, I'm not saying it was perfect. And maybe if he had just played better, they wouldn't be in that situation. But at the end of the day, during some moments, you saw something out of him. You've never seen that out of Tua. The way that some of that fan base believes in Tua blows my mind. Blows my mind.
But I would say the same. I would say the same thing about Niner fans as well, though. In terms of how much they believe in Brock, in terms of
I agree. Listen,
I would say like
I agree with that.
I know you do, but like it's both fan bases think both of them are like a top 5 quarterback or top 2, 3 quarterback, right? Like and this is why I always say like with any quarterback or any player, it's stats lie all the time, man. Like we see it with quarterbacks often. Like we Tua, Brock, like we truly like when you have stacked rosters, great offensive coordinators, you're going to get more production from those players, right? Now, if you put Tua on the Niners and Brock on the Niners, or the Brock on the Dolphins, you get the same production from both quarterbacks that they're giving now?
No, I think it's actually similar to the Love situation. I don't know that Brock Purdy can operate that offense as it's ran over there. I don't, because Tua definitely has a better go ball. He does throw a better. He throws a really good go ball. That's probably the best thing about his game. But Brock just does all the other thing. Like if a play breaks down, he can make something happen. You know what I mean? And all the intermediate stuff, he's in a level. I don't know that Brock can fully execute that game plan to the same standards, but I also think that Mike McDaniel would be smart enough to adjust it to what Brock Purdy does and get the best out of him. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Listen, I agree. I think there are definitely 49er fans that are very delusional on what they think Brock already is, right? But at least when I look at Brock, I see the potential for a mainstay top 10 guy. I don't see that at all from Tua. I don't see any of that potential. Like Tua is what he is. And then, by the way, this is a guy who came into the league with a major injury and has had multiple major head injuries since. We haven't even gotten to that part of the discussion. So to trust that and go, absolutely not. Nope. No way. No way. There's a lot of players I would take over Tua, a lot of quarterbacks.
One of the comments I did see, I don't know where it's at now, but he talked about Mike Shanahan running Kyle's offense. It's not the same system over there. It's not. When you turn on the tape, they're running same.
You mean Mike McDaniel? No, that's not
McDaniel.
even. No.
It's just such a different. Like he uses similar the run game, similar passing concepts. But man, Mike McDaniel is so aggressive when he's calling games. Man, he's pushing the ball down the field. He's trying to do things a lot different over there. It's not the same system. A lot of concepts are the same, but he's put his own twist on Kyle Shanahan's offense. It is not the same system or same offense. You would see Brock pushing the ball downfield to Tyreek Hill, and to be honest, both quarterbacks, Tua and Brock, are not fit for a guy like Tyreek Hill or Jaylen Waddle or even Brandon Aiyuk. Those are guys you want to push the ball downfield with, and they don't have the arm strength to do so.
Yeah, I agree with that. But no, there isn't. You watch that offense, and it is completely different. So no, absolutely not. All right, now right after Purdy, a couple picks later was Trevor Lawrence. Who would you take there, Purdy or Lawrence? Now remember, this is different. Like we've done lists where it's like, hey, who are you taking for 1 year? Who are you taking right now? And I think we both had Purdy above Lawrence, actually. But this is who are you drafting to be your franchise quarterback from the 2020 draft to the 2024 draft, which is what Bleacher Report did. So that's a whole different thing. That means you're strapped to this guy for the foreseeable future. So I just want to lay that out. It could change things. I'm
taking Lawrence. I'm taking Lawrence, man. Because when you look at the Jags, one, terrible. They people don't understand what it truly does to a quarterback or a player when they have the worst possible situation. Urban Meyer over there with the Jags was terrible. Now, when you look at Trevor Lawrence, he's making throws left and right, and he's having a lot of receivers drop his balls that he's placing in the bucket. Calvin Ridley last year, I could count like 7 passes on the top of my head where it's placed perfect ball placement right.
There was one game that Rich posted where there was 4 drop touchdown passes, like dimes that he laid right in the hand, and they dropped 4 of them touchdowns in one game. It was crazy.
Yeah. So like when you truly watch the actual tape of Trevor Lawrence, so much good is there. So much also bad is there in terms of forcing things, but also you force things when you don't have a great defense and great playmakers and weapons, right? A lot of drop passes led to interceptions, a lot of stuff like that happens to Trevor Lawrence, which happens to every quarterback. But I think the upside for Trevor Lawrence with a great play caller and good weapons, because truthfully, he hasn't had a good receiver. Calvin Ridley coming off a year where he did not play is not the same Calvin Ridley. So for me, I'm taking Trevor Lawrence over Purdy, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, wow, how can you do that? Look at the film. Look at the film shows otherwise. It does not show the same play, the same as the stats. I think Trevor Lawrence's film is better than Brock Purdy's. That's just me.
Yeah, I actually don't necessarily disagree with that portion of it, but for me, there's something to like, you can't gauge the fire in a player. And I feel like that either comes through or it doesn't. And I don't know what it is about Lawrence. By the way, huge Lawrence fan coming out of college, right? Like he was the rightful number 1 pick in that draft. I mean, I remember like, God, could this guy start in the NFL coming out of high school? Like that was the conversation being had back then. He was so good in college. As a freshman, the things he was doing to other top tier college athletes that were about to be pro was phenomenal. And then you started to see this like slow regression, but it was like, okay, well, Clemson's kind of in this flux and there were so many things that happened. And then he did get drafted to a horrible situation. I understand all those things, but man, I don't know what it is about him, but when I watch him, there's nothing about him that screams confidence. Right. And I know that that's like something
super steady. When you watch him, he's super steady, Eddie. Never smiles, never like gets upset. He's super steady, Eddie. Yeah. I agree with you on that one.
Yeah. And so it's like you saw a moment where that team was able to come from behind against the Chargers in the playoffs, right? And so you see that moment. He won a national championship in college. So it's not like he can't will his team to win games. But there's just something missing and I can't put my finger on it. From a talent standpoint, a pure talent standpoint, and even a film standpoint, I understand what you're saying about Lawrence, and I don't necessarily disagree. But it goes back to the Hurts thing, where it's like, I have to make a decision now, or a decision's already been made on Hurts, and I don't know what exactly he is. Lawrence, I have to essentially make a decision now. I mean, I don't, but I kind of do. So because of that, there's just so many questions, and he may answer them all this year. And that's great. If I were to take him, I would probably make him play out that option and be like, I don't know, we'll figure it out from here. But because of that, I would probably have to go Purdy just because of the situation. Now, if they were both rookies again, or I could just start over and get 4 more years to evaluate them, I would probably go with Lawrence, hoping that the upside comes through. I would. But with their situation as it is right now, knowing I have to make a decision on Lawrence right in this moment, and I don't know exactly what he is, and I still have so many questions, I would have to go with what I feel like is a little bit safer. Even though the upside's not there, I'd have to go with a little bit safer. So I would probably slightly lean Purdy there as well.
Do we see different praises for Lawrence if he's on a different team? Like if he wasn't sent to Urban Meyer that year 1, or like, for example, let's say he was with a Kyle Shanahan like offense, right, and not with Doug Peterson, and he was actually with, let's say, Mike McDaniels or Mike McDaniels. Are we singing different like praises on him? Are we talking about him differently? Because when I watch the film, you see the quarterback there, like you see the guy. The only thing you don't see, and I do know what you're talking about in terms of like, he makes a big time throw or big time play, or they make a play, and he's just same dude, straight face, walks off the field, doesn't have that like swagger to him, doesn't have that moxie, you know what I mean? Like,
well, hold on, and I want to be clear about this too. Herbert's another player that is similar to that, and I'm okay with that. My preference is like somebody that gets. I love getting fired up and stuff. I love all that crap from Purdy. You know what I mean? It's stupid, but I enjoy that because I know that he's loving the game, he's enjoying it, and that comes through. But that doesn't mean like I'm always taking that player. If like Herbert, what he's already proven in this league and how he can play and how he can manipulate defenses and how he can just, I mean, he's completely played in 2 completely different offenses. He came into the league and was throwing downfield on a regular basis, making every big time throw you can think of. Then he had so many injuries to his receivers where nobody could get separation. So they turned him into a true dink and dunk player, and he had to execute that offense. And he did it to damn near perfection. they're not winning not because of him. They're not winning because their defense has been historically bad. Historically bad. So that being said, Herbert doesn't show that fire either, but I'm okay with that because I know what Herbert is. I don't know what Lawrence is. So it's like that to me is the tiebreaker when I just don't know what you are yet. I don't know.
No, but you do see Herbert have more enthusiasm and energy on the field than Lawrence at times.
A little
like,
bit.
A little bit. Like it's there, but like they're more reserved dudes. So it's like that's what's interesting in terms of them. But I would take Lawrence. I think he's a better quarterback. In the film, I'm going off of film. I'm not going off of stats, man. And I know you're not either, but I know like for most in the chat, like, oh, look at the stats or look at XYZ.
I don't care about the stats. I literally could give two rips about the stats. And I agree. I mean, there's a lot of film that is really good on Trevor Lawrence. I don't disagree there. There's just something missing. There's, but I don't know. Anyways, that's where I'm at. I also want to talk about this like crop of players where you've got Williams, Daniels, and Richardson. This was kind of my argument going into this draft. People are like, if you could trade Brock Purdy to, let's say, the Vikings or whatever, like they would take him in a heartbeat for a first round pick. And I said, no, they wouldn't. But what they would do though, is they would jump at the chance to draft a JJ McCarthy because that they get him for a longer time, cheaper. And there's an upside there potentially that you're not going to get or that you can't visually see with Brock Purdy. And I don't want to say you're not going to get because you could get it, right? I don't know. I don't want to predict the future, but
there's the talent. There's a talent cap, man. And I'm not saying that in terms of there's a talent cap that throws.
Okay, so you're saying from a talent standpoint, if they both reach their full, okay, all right, that's fair. Yeah. But the point is that teams are willing to take lottery tickets more than you would think. They just are, and so that I understand why Richardson would be as high as he is. Daniels and Williams would be as high as they are because they're lottery tickets, but boy, are they extremely talented. So I believe that if there was a redraft, that those players would go above Brock Purdy. And I don't think I don't think there's really an argument for me on there. I definitely think they would go ahead of Brock. I do.
Yeah, and it's because of the upside. It's because they have certain physical attributes that you can't teach, right? You have each of those guys have strong arms. They have the athletic ability, whether it's to be a mobile guy who could run, do X, Y, Z. So if you're telling me, and this is something Kyle Shanahan has talked about, this isn't just something that us as content creators are talking about. We've heard Kyle Shanahan talk about you're looking for a guy, and this when he said this when he was drafting at the 3rd overall pick. You're looking for a guy who could be in the top 7 quarterbacks or the top 5 quarterbacks every single year. You're not looking for a guy who could be there at the top 7, the top 10, and then fall off eventually. He goes, so essentially those talented guys could be in that top category for years to come. Now we don't know what they are yet, obviously, because they're all in their first year or their second year. But when Anthony Richardson was healthy, we saw what he was able to do as a quarterback in terms of his rushing ability, his arm strength, making throws that are had with arm strength. A lot of people talk about arm strength like, oh, you don't need arm strength. Look at Brock. You need arm strength when it matters. And when it matters is when there are tight windows. And when you look at Brock, he's had trouble with tighter windows when teams are starting to run split coverages against him, and he's having to fit it in a tight window. That's where he's starting to struggle. So those guys, they might not struggle with that. So I get why they're going ahead of Brock in this mock. Also, or this mock draft or redraft. We also got to factor their contracts are a lot prettier than Brock Purdy's for the next couple of years. They have 4 years before they have to sign their extension. Brock is signing an extension next year.
Yeah. And that does factor into it because, again, remember, with this redraft, you are getting their contracts. So, but yeah, I remember like there was talk this offseason, like, I don't know, I'll tell you what, man, like, I guarantee Brock changes the way that quarterbacks are drafted. It's like, no. I'm sorry. Like, Brock is amazing and he was a flyer and he's well outplayed expectations. but nobody gets the number 1 overall pick and goes, "Oh my God, if I could just get the next Brock Purdy, oh God, we'd be set." Like nobody says that. Nobody goes after the next Brock Purdy. I'm sorry that it's harsh, but that's the reality. They're looking at guys with cannon arms and 6'4" and mobile and all that stuff, and it doesn't make it right sometimes. Those things aren't the most important thing if you can't make the throws and do all the things, but that's what teams are looking for. And when you get it and you get a guy that also has it up here, that's when you've really hit the lottery. Okay. You don't hit the lottery when you just have it up here or when you just have it physically. It's when you can combine both of them. And it's rare. It's very hard to do. But one thing you can say is if I know for a fact you have physical limitation, I don't know what it's going to be like mentally all the time. I can't measure that, but I can measure the physical limitations. And when I'm going to draft a player, if I already guarantee that I'm not getting half of it, then I'm going to go with the other guy. It's just the reality of the situation, man. This is sports. As much as you want to not make it about being an athlete, this is professional athletics. You're looking for guys that can be elite in that area as well. That's the reality of it. This isn't chess or, whatever, a mind thing you can think of. So it's professional athletics. You're looking for athletes. Brother Bob says, Jesse, turn off these damn ads. You can be late. Okay. Hold on. First of all, I set it to like the minimum. It's one commercial every 30 minutes. And that's not even a guarantee. It like picks a crop of people and throws it on there. It's not even like, and if I don't do it, then the ads will be turned off after the show and I'll forget about them. Like, I don't know, man. All that money you guys throw in here and you don't have like the $10 a month for like avoid
Free
YouTube ads. Come on, man.
I think that's a brother Bob situation.
Dave says, agreed, brother Bob, no ads. How much you need? And then brother Bob says, Dave, you wow, bro. But yeah, Nails, here's $2 more. I think I missed one. And Dave said, hold on, I'll be back. I'll get more money or something. Dazza says, what do you think about Chris Sims having Brock Purdy ranked 17th in his top 40? I had Brock Purdy ranked 10th. So, I mean, honestly, when I looked at it, and this is still how I view it, I can hear an argument for Brock Purdy as low as, I think I said 14 or 15, depending on what you value, and as high as 10. I actually have him at 10. I think 17 is a little too low for me. A little too low. I don't know how you make that argument. He had Baker Mayfield above. I'm sorry, dude. I can't. Baker Mayfield, like.
But what's weird is he's like best friends with Kyle. Like,
I know.
That's what's like when I'm looking at this thing.
But hold on, but it's not that weird actually when you think about it, right? Because him poo-pooing Brock elevates Kyle, right? Every time that he has a bad quarterback, it elevates his friend as a genius and that can do no wrong. So actually, it's not that weird. I don't think it is that weird.
That's actually a really good point. You're right on that one. But it's also when you, because I'm sure he watches Kyle's games all the damn time, like every week.
Yeah.
And he puts his quarterbacks in categories, right? This category is good, solid quarterback. They're a good, solid quarterback, but with caveats. Like there's questions there, and you could argue there is questions regarding Brock Purdy.
You can't argue it. There is questions regarding Brock Purdy. Like it's not arguable.
I get the category he's in. I just don't agree with where he's at. But if you truly look at the category, he hasn't came out with the full top 32. I think he's working his way there. So it's like I want to see who he has in the top 15, top 10, because there's a lot of questions if he has guys that shouldn't be there or I don't agree with. But at the same time, it's his list. I get it. He's not in the wrong category in terms of he's a good quarterback, but there's question marks to be there. The right category for him, to be honest with you.
By the way, totally fair. I agree with all of that. But he already lost me when he put Baker up there. Listen, I
Yeah,
actually think that I think that there's a scenario where Baker could put up really good numbers in this offense. I don't deny that. I just can't stand Baker Mayfield, man. I don't know. Can I just say that? Like, I can't stand Baker Mayfield. I would, and I also want to say that I'm giving him credit from the standpoint that he might have turned a corner on this. Let me see it again. But I think in Tampa, he kind of got humbled and had to rebuild himself. And I give him all the credit in the world for doing that. But going into last year, it's like, dude, you're arrogant for no reason. I don't think you're that good. I've never thought you're that good. I think he played his best football last year. I also think that coincided with him being the best mentally that he's been off the field, the most focused he's been. So maybe he's turned a corner, but as of now, there's no way I'm taking Baker Mayfield over Brock. I'm sorry.
What about Kyler? Are you taking Kyler Murray over Brock? Because he was right there. Would you have been?
Kyler.
Would you have been okay if Brock was at 15 and everyone else was just right under him?
Yeah, probably 14, 15-ish. I probably, because I mean, the guys that, like, when we've done these lists, like, to me, I had 1 through 9 and those were my locks. And then at number 10, I basically just had like a group of 5 quarterbacks and said, pick who you prefer. Right. And whatever you prefer, I'm fine with. So my group of 5, I think, was, I want to say it was Brock Purdy, Jordan Love, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence. And I said, however you want to group that, I'm fine with. You can make an argument for any one of them. My personal choice in this moment is Brock Purdy. So I put him at 10 and the other 4 are right there. But I'll listen to them for even being ahead of Brock, which would then put him, I think, at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That'd put him at 14 overall. So, 14, 15, I guess I could hear, but 17's a little low. And the player is already seeing, I don't know, I'm just saying there's a quarterback in there. I wouldn't. Kyler Murray, we'll see how he comes back from his injury. We talk about some of the physical stuff. He certainly has limitations, I think, seeing over the middle with his height. But then he's got the mobility that is hard to find, and he's got the arm that is hard to find. He's questionable up here, or has been. It sounds like he's turned it around, but I got to see it before I'm fully believing that. Like, let me see him be a leader. We've heard too many teammates leave there and be like, Kyler ain't it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, that's one's too many, and we've heard one too many. So
Rich actually says Love is ahead of Brock on this list. So he has Love in the top 14, which I agree with. I agree with Love being ahead of Brock.
Like I said, I'll listen to that argument. I personally don't have it, but I have Love at 11, and I have them very close. Steve says, "Can we do a ranking on my girlfriends asking for Kenny?"
He said, "Not 1, but 2, 3, 4."
Yeah, how many do you have? Brother Bob says his name is PP and should not be uttered on shows. Didn't you just utter it? I don't. And but who? What? Like what? How did he even get brought up? I don't. Anyways. I think I actually brought him up from a show. I don't have any issues with him. I have 0 issues with Larry, like 0 issues. We just don't do shows together, but I don't have a single issue with him at all. I could care less, man. I hope everything's going great over there. The last time we talked, it was nothing but like positive things that I sent his way and vice versa. There is literally nothing going on other than we don't do shows together. That is it. Keith says, agree, Jesse. Hurts, good year. Looks like an outlier, I think his phone auto-corrected to outlet. You've been doing shopping at the outlet malls. Steve-O says, did we lose last Super Bowl because of QB play? No, absolutely not. We didn't. But Steve-O, this is where we get down a very slippery slope. Okay. And I agree. I just think that most fans are not consistent when we talk about other quarterbacks. Okay. Because I agree. We did not lose the Super Bowl because of Brock Purdy. Now, it's also fair to say they didn't win. Like, if they had won, they wouldn't have won because of him either. Unless they had, like, if he had thrown a touchdown on the last drive, maybe okay. But how he played, let's say somehow Kansas City doesn't score at all on the last drive and the 49ers win, I'm not looking at Brock and be like, oh, he's the reason they won. I wouldn't have said that either. I think he was good enough to win. or just maybe not good enough to lose, but it wasn't on him at all. But let's keep that energy when we talk about other quarterbacks, right? Because what I see in my chats on a regular basis is, oh, I mean, what has Josh Allen ever accomplished? What has Herbert ever accomplished? And it's like, hold on. Josh Allen literally is the reason that the overtime rule freaking changed. And the 49ers probably lost this Super Bowl if we're keeping it a full stack right now, because Josh Allen went into a playoffs, had 9 touchdowns with 0 turnovers, completed like 75% of his passes, including 4 touchdowns against the Chiefs on the road, threw a touchdown with 13 seconds left to give them a 3-point lead, not a field goal, not, hey, we left with a lead because our team got a field goal. No, we left the field with the lead because I just threw a game-winning touchdown and my defense couldn't keep them out of position of field goal for 13 seconds. And then we get to overtime and I don't even touch the ball because the Kansas City Chiefs score a touchdown. And the rule then was, if you score a touchdown, the game's over. What more could Josh Allen have done to have won that game? But when I get into these chats, all I hear is, I mean, why do you think Josh is so good? What has he ever done? So I'm fine with what you're saying, Steve-O. I agree with it. As long as you keep that same energy for everybody, and let's act like the games are on television and we can physically watch them and they're not like on Mars and then we have to read about it with news clippings and then look at the stats and guess what happened. No, they're actually on TV. I promise you, you can change the channel, watch these guys play, and tell why a game was won or lost and whether that was on the quarterback or not. But we don't do that unless we're making concessions for our quarterback. That's my only frustration. And Steve-O, by the way, I'm not saying that's you. I'm just saying in general, we tend to not give these caveats to other quarterbacks because they're not our quarterback. You feel me?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you could also say Brock absolutely wasn't the reason the Niners lost, right?
No.
But he didn't play good enough for us to say he's a elite quarterback, right? Like elite quarterbacks are winning that game when your defense holds Patrick Mahomes to 19 points. That's just plain and simple. That's just an elite quarterback cannot only score, at least for Brock's situation, with the amount of weapons he's had, with the level of offense he has. You cannot score that many points, 19, in a Super Bowl. I get Mahomes did it. Mahomes has Super Bowls where he's carried the offense or he's done something crazy, spectacular to win a game in the Super Bowl. So, I mean, end of the day, I think it's concerning when your quarterback doesn't play as great as you want him to play in the Super Bowl, but he wasn't the reason they lost.
See, for me, it wasn't concerning because my expectations weren't that he should ever carry this team in year 2. Like, I think that's it's an unrealistic expectation.
Well, my expectations, I'm sorry to cut you off, but my expectations go like when fans talk about a player as a lead,
no, I agree.
I'm gonna hold the fans to that, right? But when we're actually talking like in terms of all of NFL, he had a good Super Bowl. But like when it comes to Niner fans talking, they talk about him like as he's the next Joe Montana or he's just as good as Mahomes. It's like, all right, now we're comparing him to this. Well, this is the bar. All right, you set the bar for him. So now let's talk about him as that. And I think that's what comes off from a lot of people as me being such a Brock Purdy hater, because I'm just holding him to the standard that they're holding him to. So if we're going to hold him to that standard, he's not at that standard. But if we league wide, he's a really damn good quarterback, man.
Exactly. I mean, I think, again, when we did our rankings, I had him at 10, you had him at whatever, close to that. And it's like, but somehow that's not good enough. Right. And so that's where the argument does come in when I start to hear things like, oh, I mean, really, if we're just keeping it as far as what the accomplishments are, I mean, Brock Purdy's right behind Mahomes. It's like, okay, well, if that's how we're going to talk about him, then we're going to have a very different conversation about who Brock Purdy is and who he's not. And now we are going to hold him to those standards, which again, I think are completely unfair. I don't think that should have ever been the expectation, but if that was your expectation, then you should be extremely disappointed, and then it's like, you got these guys that lose to Mahomes and the Chiefs in the AFC and they don't make a Super Bowl. And then so you get to say things like, well, I mean, Brock made it to a Super Bowl, so he's better than X quarterback. It's like, no, Brock just didn't play Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs before the Super Bowl. So he was lucky enough to wait to lose to the Super Bowl. The other guys have to go through him to just get to the Super Bowl. That is the difference. That's the only difference. The only difference.
And then by that
Because-
standard that they use is that means Jimmy Garoppolo is this spectacular quarterback because he took the Niners to the Super Bowl, right?
Well, again, and if we're just in a box score scout, I mean, let's look at Josh Allen, even in I thought was a down game for him, right? Josh Allen had like 250 something total yards against the Chiefs. That he threw the same amount as Brock Purdy, completed at a higher percentage completion, accounted for 3 touchdowns in that game, 2 rushing, 1 throwing, I believe. So accounted for 3 touchdowns, put up more points in cold weather, by the way, outdoors, and his team lost. And he had if one of the 2 deep balls that he threw that were on the money, one of them was a 70 air yards and was dropped by Diggs. But there was one earlier that was 50 yards downfield that was also right in the receiver's hands and was dropped. If either one of those are caught, the stats look completely different. But you know what? Brock Purdy lost in the Super Bowl and Josh Allen didn't. So immediately Brock Purdy's better. It's like, no, I can't go, man. I can't do it. That's where the arguments happen. Dave says we lost the last Super Bowl because of Kyle. Possible. Dave says Kyle being the reason we lose does not mean that he isn't a good coach the rest of the time. Just so the chat knows where I'm at, trade Kyle Levy. Steve-O says, raise your hand if you thought San Francisco was drafting offensive line first round. I didn't actually. I wish they did, and I wish that there would have been the guys that fell. But you and I talked about it, Marco. We both said they were going to go receiver first or second round. Like, that was not the surprising aspect. The surprising aspect was that they didn't go offensive line with first or second round pick. That was actually what surprised me. It wasn't the first round pick. It was the neither. Keith says, never been high on Lawrence. I thought Deshaun was better during his run at Clemson. Lawrence got worse every year. Deshaun was
something else at Clemson, man.
He was incredible. Dave says, come on, Jesse. People aren't looking for 200. What's 200? I don't know.
I don't know.
Oh, maybe. Frank says, hey, Jesse, Grant, Larry K. Larry Kruger, Larry K. I couldn't say that for some reason. And Larry Kruger show would get a ton of views. Listen, here's my thing. I don't know if you've paid attention to the vibe, and I've said it a million times. It would. And I appreciate that, Frank. Obviously, if I want to go full time, views and money and all that's going to be important. But to me, there's also something about just doing shows with people that you really, truly enjoy. And that's what I'm doing. I'll put that above a click or a view. That's more important to me at this point. Brother Bob says, well, I have issues with PP. I said it and I've told him. That's fair. You guys can definitely do it. I'm just saying I don't. Brother Bob says, yeah, that's Kyle's. Kyle, that's the rule. Kyle Levy didn't know. The overtime rule. That's what I'm talking about. Keith says, I think Josh is great, but beat Mahomes like Burrow did. Man. Okay, I'm going to read the rest of this. That's when I'll put you over Burrow. Right now, Burrow's the only active player to do it. I can't stress this enough. And Keith, this isn't I love you, man. I've gone and watched your channel. I support you, you support me. Nothing but love for you. But man, quarterbacks don't go on the field and compete against each other. Mahomes isn't playing defense against Burrow, and Burrow's not playing defense on Patrick. This isn't basketball where it's hey, who would win in one-on-one? You got to guard each other. Defense matters. They play the opposing defense. Okay. What did Burrow do in that game that was so impressive? In that AFC Championship game? Were you impressed by what Burrow did in that AFC Championship to get to the Super Bowl? Because I personally wasn't watching that game. I'm not saying Burrow's not good. I have him in my top 5. I just don't think there's anything that he can do on the football field that Josh Allen can't. And I know for a fact there's a lot that Josh Allen can do that Burrow cannot. Period. So if he had just put him on the shoulders and he was the reason they beat the Kansas City Chiefs, sure. But that's not how I saw that game at all.
I mean, you could also argue that Burrow was also the reason why the Bengals lost to the Kansas City Chiefs last time they played in the playoffs. Then he had like 2 interceptions in a crucial game. He took 5 sacks because he was holding on to the ball a little too long. So we could also argue that it's
okay. Can you do me a favor again? I don't want to box score scout, but I just said watching the game, I didn't feel like he had a great game in the AFC Championship that they won. Will you tell me what the numbers are? Because maybe
the game. I don't remember the game they won. I remember the game they lost. Remember he had 2 interceptions that game. He took like 5 or 6 sacks.
Let me. I'm gonna find him because I got to know.
Sure.
Maybe I'm off my rocker and I'll have to go watch it. Maybe the stats say something. Maybe the stats don't back up what I'm saying, and then that will make me want to rewatch that game and make sure that my eyes were not playing tricks on me. But I'm pretty sure I remember leaving that game going, I mean, that was great. They got a win, but I don't really see like.
I just remember the game I remember was the 2 interception games because as Rich is saying, like Rich is in the chat right now, those interceptions were bad. Like they were bad interceptions. So it's, I mean, when you look at it, you can say whatever you want about each player. Like it's, I don't know, man. I find it interesting.
So they beat the Chiefs. He was 23 of 38, 60% passing, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. So not bad. I'm not saying he played, but that's like, again, he played good enough. I wouldn't blame him if they had lost the game, but I'm not like, oh my God, he's the reason they won. And again, this is not me like going back and looking at the stats and saying, oh, that's the way I feel about it. That's how I felt in the moment. The stats are just verifying how I felt about that game. I never thought that he was the reason that they won that championship. So, Keith says Allen played better against the Chiefs defense than Brock did. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Also, but they didn't win, so that's his fault.
It was also a different Chiefs defense, if we're being honest.
Yeah. Harold says get to Kittle. Okay, yeah, you're right. We get stuck on this quarterback thing. We're gonna wrap through this one actually pretty quick. Okay, George Kittle. He has a core injury, which is interesting because you told me this a few months ago. I know that we had seen that Ward had core surgery. I don't remember hearing about Kittle. Maybe it was out there in the ether. I somehow missed it. You told me it had it a couple months ago. Now it has for sure come out. I mean, that much we know. He talked about it. Are you worried about George Kittle like not being ready for training camp? Because he says he's on pace to be ready for training camp and everything is like he should be good. But is there something in the back of your mind that's looking at this tight end room that has a lot of question marks and is like, man, George Kittle ain't right. This could get ugly real quick. Like, do you have any concern about it?
Super concerned about it, man. Because when he did say I'll be back by training camp, he said that's the plan. I had the hopes, right? Like he was using certain words. It's like that's the plan, and I understand that his plan is to be back by training camp. But I actually have a Monday show with Jay Harp. Played in the NFL for a year with the Raiders. Played at Fresno State with Devontae Adams and everything, and he had a similar surgery. He had a core surgery, and he was talking about how that core surgery completely ruined his career in the sense of he was no longer the same explosive receiver he once was. And 1 week you feel great, the next day you feel terrible. He goes, and you can't really feel, and you're like, honestly, you truly can't gauge it. And for Kittle, if he's not healthy training camp, it's a good thing, but also a bad thing. And what I mean by a good thing is you get to evaluate your tight ends, right? You get to evaluate Cam Latu, who the hope is he's ready by training camp, according to George Kittle. And then Braden Willis, who George Kittle says he has high hopes for and expectations. He's looking good from what he's seeing. So that's a good thing, right? You get to evaluate those guys. But without George Kittle, this run game may be a lot different if he's not playing the first couple of weeks. If he's unable to go in the Niners take the approach of let him fully heal, or if he has a setback or anything like that, you're truly looking at an offense. If George Kittle isn't there, who's blocking on running situations? Are they running to the right? Because Cole McKivitz, he used a lot of George Kittle's help. So that's where it becomes a major concern. Does this core injury affect George Kittle as it did Jay Hart? But Jay Hart was like, honestly, I don't know if it will. Every injury, every player is different. He goes, but if it does, he goes, you're looking at 2 players on the Niners, Kittle in a position group that's very bad outside of George Kittle. He goes, at least Charvarius Ward. And this is something that I started thinking about recently as soon as Kittle re-announced and actually said, you know what, I do have that XYZ. It's a major concern if they have setbacks or if they re-injure that situation, that core. Major concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can say that about any injury. I don't know. I don't know how core injuries are. I've never had hernia surgery or, knock on wood. I've never had to go through that. You know what I mean? So I don't know what it entails, but hearing an ex-player talk about it and say, yeah, I've gone through it and it was hell and I was never the same. That is a little concerning. I'll definitely hold his opinion high, but what he's not saying, also, to be fair, and you mentioned this as well, is he's not saying that all the surgeries are the same and that it's guaranteed to go bad. So I'm just going to pray that it goes well for both of them and they're both ready to go. I mean, the 49ers, again, this is actually the biggest concern this year. And this is not just Kittle, but Kittle, for the first time in a long time, missed 0 games last year. Now, obviously, it came out later that around week 9 or so, he started to deal with this core injury, and maybe that's why he wasn't as much of the offense when it came down the stretch. That is understandable a little bit. But the 49ers were very lucky when it came to injuries last year, outside of a couple games missed here or there. They're already starting this season in a bad spot. You've got Hufanga coming back from a major injury. You've now got Ward and Kittle coming back from surgery. You've got Greenlaw, who's almost certainly going to miss some time. So they're already starting off in a bad light, and that's before the season starts. Now you got to imagine you're going to go through some attrition throughout the season. It's just why it's so hard to pick them to get back to another Super Bowl after going through all that last year. There's so many things working against them. To be real with you, I'll say this. A lot of people have their issues with Kyle Shanahan, and I am not one to hold punches in my frustration with him from time to time. But man, as frustrated as we have been with him, a lot of us have been with him. If they win a Super Bowl, I would be more impressed if they win a Super Bowl this year than any of the other years. Because I don't look at it anymore and say, wow, the 49ers clearly have the best roster. They have a very good roster. It's at worst a top 5 roster. I understand that. But last year, to me, it was very obvious they had the best roster going into it. I think towards the tail end of the year, I started to look at the Ravens and say, oh, God, they've got one too. But they were top 2 at worst, and they probably weren't 2. This year, some teams have played major catch-up as far as on paper and trying to win a Super Bowl. You add in the injury standpoint. You add in the fact that you just climbed that mountain and you've got to do it again. You're dealing with all these players in the offseason that are trying to get paid. There's so many things going against them that if they were to win, Kyle deserves all the credit in the world along with those players. So
I absolutely agree. And then my biggest thing is, let's say George Kittle does miss week 1, right? You're playing such a good defense where does that alter the way your season starts, right? Losing at home to the Jets without George Kittle, that's possible because now it's easier to defend the 49ers in a lot of situations. And Robert Saleh is a really good defensive coordinator. So that's very possible. Does he miss that Rams game, which is early in the season, which it could be a deciding factor in terms of who wins the division? The Rams are a good team. So that's what starts getting get talked about and everything like that. So it's very interesting. I don't think he misses time. Hopefully he doesn't. But it's definitely concerning that he's hoping to be ready by training camp.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Brother Bob says Kittle's injury is another reason why we will re-sign BA. I hope so. I hope that he's not injured, but I hope they re-sign BA. Alan from Cole says, do you think Brock wins the Super Bowl if he was on the Lions? No. Wins the Super Bowl? No. Absolutely not. I mean,
who's the Niners quarterback? Because I don't know if the same situation, I don't think they get past the Niners.
You just swap him and Goff, I guess. I don't know.
I still don't think they'd get past the Niners.
And even if they did, they weren't beating the Chiefs. That Lions team, there was a lot. listen, that Lions team was good, but there was a lot to be desired on that defensive side of the football. Now they've rectified that, and that's what makes them interesting this year. And I think they've closed that gap a little bit. But last year, that defense, I mean, Kendall Fillmore, whatever his name was starting at corner. Like, who was that guy? Keith says Steve Young was right. I'm not saying we don't have a chance, but last year was the year to do it. Yeah, I think we've kind of all been saying that. A lot of fans have been saying that early. Brian says, not sure if you already mentioned it, but Chris Sims ranking Purdy 17th is a joke. His reasoning is even worse. Not sure if you saw it. I didn't actually see his reasoning, Brian. I did see where he had him. We did talk about it, actually. Again, I think 17 is too low for sure, but I didn't hear his reasoning. Chris Sims is very smart, and I respect a lot of what he does, but man, there's some things that I definitely disagree with Chris Sims. But that's sports, man. That's what I love about sports. Like everybody has their own opinion, and I guess my biggest thing, Marco, and you tell me what you think. As long as you can intelligently talk through your opinion, even if I disagree with you, I'm going to give you props.
Same. Major. Because, man, you have guys who just give, and I see this a lot on 49ers Twitter, man, where you have guys who they'll give an opinion on a player, right? For example, and I've noticed this extremely with Deebo Samuel. They're like, he's a top 10 receiver. You ask why. Look at his stats. You're like, okay, well, are we including, I'm like, okay, well, are we including his rushing stats? Are we, because like a receiver, we're comparing receivers as a receiver, downfield receiver. And like, their argument is because he's Deebo Samuel. He's the best with the ball in his hands. I'm like, that doesn't mean he's a top 10 receiver. That means he's a top playmaker. Like, so it's like, like those kind of conversations, like, they're not like giving you any evidence on why he, like you could be, I could be wrong, but I'm going to give you at least what I think, or at least my evidence to defend my opinion. Well, it could be the worst opinion in the world, but if someone has an opinion on it and they're able to defend their opinion, shout out to you. I give you respect, man.
This is ridiculous. Dazza says the problem with evaluating QBs is that they're evaluated on their current team. Always. And also I would say, and again, this is not a shot at anybody. I get it. People have lives. I was not this guy that was just pouring through film either, right? And just watching all these games all the time. I was mainly watching the 49ers, but as I've gotten older, I've watched more and more quarterbacks. I've gone back and watched more and more games. I've been lucky enough to get my hands on all 22 or whatever, and just quickly watch through these games. And technology's changed. You can, even just watching the television version, you're not going to get as much as the all 22, but just watching how a game went down, you can watch a game in 35 minutes now. You know what I mean? So there's more at your disposal. And I've seen way too much football and quarterback play over the last 7 or so years, way more than I ever used to be able to say. And so my opinion on evaluating these players is vastly different than what it would have been 7 to 10 years ago, because I also would have just been grinding stats and been like, well, this stat and this stat. To me, stats are great, and I definitely am going to bring them up. They are important to a certain extent, but there's nothing that can override what you see. And sometimes you can't even put that into words. You just see that this player is better. I don't know what to tell you. That's just what I see. So it's different. And I would say 90% of people that watch football don't watch more than their team unless it's primetime games. And that's it. And they make their decision based off a few primetime games a year and watching their team for 17 games. And that's just the reality of the situation. That's okay. But I also don't expect those guys to hold up intelligently in a quarterback breakdown either, or a debate. So Keith says for a QB,
why are you going to talk about me like that for?
Sorry. Keith says for a QB, Sims seems like a meathead. He's Gronk. He's definitely a meathead. I do enjoy Sims and his commentary. He does annoy me sometimes too. All right. Let's talk about this roster eval. I'm going to let you break this one down because this was all you, and I kind of want to understand like what you meant by this whole thing, and then we can go through it.
Yeah. So for me, right, the last couple of years, right, the Niners have had one of the best teams in the NFL, right? We constantly talk about Niners have the best roster on paper. Every like dating back to Jimmy Garoppolo's last year, you could argue the Niners had one of the deepest rosters, right? Over the years, the Niners have done things in the draft, free agency that has been either concerning, questioning, or good. So for me, I'm looking at the Niners roster, right? And there's certain positions, there's a certain levels where you're like, well, we could have been better at this position, right? Like, we could argue offensive line, we could argue backup tight end, we could argue the corner situation, linebacker, right? Now that we don't have Dre Greenlaw, how that looks with Devondre Campbell, the defensive line, they lost a lot of depth when they went and signed Hargrave. So just looking at it, is there anything you would have done differently for the 49ers over the last few years that you think would have won the 49ers a Super Bowl? Whether that's not signing Hargrave, whether that's actually going out and getting a tight end too, like Josh Oliver, who I believe signed with the Vikings. I could be wrong. Signing a right tackle instead of signing Hargrave. Is there anything possible that the Niners could have done differently that leads to a Super Bowl over the last few years, or even this year?
Yeah, I think it's hard to guarantee. You just don't know how it would play out for sure. But there's definitely some ways that I would have constructed the roster a little bit differently. I know that we joke about it, but continuously taking running backs and trading up for them and drafting them in the third round, and that just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, especially I expect that having Turner and having Kyle, you should be able to coach these guys up and get some really good guys and some flyers and make something shake. So I definitely wouldn't have done that with guys like Sermon and TDP and what have you. Moody, obviously, at that time, round 3, there was very good offensive linemen, not just turned out to be good, but prospects that were good prospects that were left on the board. They chose not to go that route. If you just look at how they've drafted the trenches the last couple of years, not just the offensive line, but the defensive line, they've all but neglected it, really. So their roster building and hearing them talk about their roster building, I don't know if you saw what Forrester said, but this shocked the hell out of me. He was talking about the offensive line, and he was basically like, no, just give me a hodgepodge of whatever. I'll make it work. Like,
but then when you look, when he said that, it blew my mind, because name one player that he's developed that he's drafted in the 4th round or later.
Yeah. I don't know. Is there one? I don't
that the Niners have drafted. You could argue, I guess, Jake Brendel, but they didn't draft him. They signed him. Colton McKivitz, maybe.
Yeah.
Even then, it's like everyone wants to replace him. Why?
Yeah. So I just think it comes from an overall philosophy. Like, they clearly don't put into the offensive line position group as much as I would like them to. I'm pretty clear. Get your quarterback. Once you've got your quarterback, you protect the quarterback. Then you go after the quarterback. And those are your 3 most important things. Guys like receivers and running backs and linebackers. Like, if I let's go through the position groups real quick, Marco. Defensive line, linebacker, secondary. Out of all 3 of those position groups, which one do you think is the least important?
The least important? So
the secondary as a whole, linebackers, and defensive line.
I personally think, man, defense is a tough one, because if you have a weak spot on a defense anywhere,
everything's kind of married together.
Married together. So, but if I had to choose, I would probably say your safeties, outside of, like, because you could have really good corners, and like the weakest spot could be your safeties. For example, I thought the Niners' weakest spot last year was safeties, and you don't see as big of a difference, because as long as they do their job, they don't have to go above and beyond, as long as you just do your job. So I would say safeties would be the position that I think you could get away with being the weakest link.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think linebackers are, for me, it would be linebacker. You know what I mean? But again, I'm trying to. I'm kind of cheating a little bit because I'm tying safeties with corner and saying secondary as a whole. But if I had to choose a spot to be weak, it would probably be linebacker. Like if you said, hey, you could have a really solid secondary and a really solid defensive line, like, but I have to be weak at linebacker, I would choose that over the others. But the 49ers put a lot of resources into that position, you know, and they did. That's oddly enough, that's what they develop really well also. Then you go to the offensive side and it's like, well, if I said pass catchers, quarterback, running back, offensive line, well, I mean, I would say running back is probably least important out of all those, right? Agreed. As far as drafting high, but they've put a lot of resources into running back. So to me, it's like just their philosophy of what they value is different than what I value. So just my whole draft board would probably be way different based off of that. So that's what I would change, is just your overall strategy and how you view a team and team building, roster building. For me, is just different. So I would change all that. I would change the core philosophy of what this team does. Like I said, you know, if they hadn't drafted Moody and they had drafted, who was it? Jones, Dawan Jones or whatever. Yeah, Dawan Jones, a Georgia tackle, solid. I mean, solid prospect. He was there. If they had gone that route, would they have won a Super Bowl? Maybe the Chiefs still beat them, but I feel like they would be in a lot better spot for the future with somebody like Dawan Jones versus Moody. So, you know, little moves like that, but the overall philosophy is what I would tweak.
And what's interesting is when the Niners hired Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, they both said that their philosophy was in the trenches, and they addressed defensive line heavy with their first couple of draft picks. They always neglected the offensive side of the ball, but when they talked about trenches, they always talked about like, oh, that's a very important part to win in the NFL. And it's just interesting that they believe your defensive line needs to be one of the best units on your roster to win a Super Bowl. What does it mean? If a team has the best defensive line, don't you think you need to have a good offensive line to block that defensive line? Like, that's for me, like when their philosophy, once you got the D line established, great. What about your offensive line? So for me, I think I agree with you in terms of drafting running backs in the third round, kickers in the third round. I think not addressing certain things, like knowing that you don't have a second tight end and you could have had Tanyan, right? Like there's stuff like that, like little things where they've always wanted to get better at that position, but they never do. That's where I'm kind of like more so looking at the roster. They had a really good defensive line before they signed Javon Hargrave. They signed Javon Hargrave, and that could have been used for the offensive line. It could have been used for depth on certain situations, but instead they didn't, and they rather have a weaker D line last year. And that's the stuff that, looking at the roster, evaluating it, is a concern.
Yeah, how did your thing get blocked off of YouTube in general? The only one that can block you from the channel is like me. That's so weird. That definitely didn't happen, Sivo. I promise you that. So hopefully you're talking about YouTube in general. I don't know what's going on there, but like that's weird. Anyways,
unless it was like one of the comments he said and they didn't agree with it, they will block you for it.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, the thing is though, is like my moderators, I'll double check the moderators in the chat, Stevo. They can block you from themselves. They can put you on timeout. They might be able to block you from the channel, but I can go on the back end and double check. So I promise you I'll go double check after this. I didn't see anything that you said that was crazy to me. So I don't know. It wasn't me. And KB Toy, no, I didn't block you. Rich says the offensive line issues are overblown. Team values 5 eligible pass catchers in the concept with all that talent, and that often means that 5 in pass pro QBs are responsible for pressures, sacks, and free rushers too. Certainly. But listening to Tom Brady talk just a few days ago on Colin Cowherd's show, he went on for 5 minutes about how important he thinks the offensive line is. Now, he's got 7 rings on his hand, so I'm going to kind of trust what he says. And he couldn't say enough about the offensive line. Now, what you might be saying is, hey, the offensive line wasn't necessarily as bad, which is fair. That, you know, you may be right about that. But I think it's also fair to say that this is not an elite offensive line by any means. Like, they're far off from being that. Like, if it's not as bad, we're probably talking about it being okay-ish. You know what I mean? So I don't know. But
Well, do you think it affected the Niners not being able to run to the right side of the right side? Like, did that affect the Niners, right? Like, only you're very predictable come certain situations against really good defenses. Does that become predictable, right? I thought the Niners are pretty predictable. You really weren't going to run to the right side. And if you did, it was more so just to keep the defense honest. You weren't going to get any amazing plays out of that side or any great production from that side.
yeah, most certainly. JC Montana says anyone can watch all 22. Yes, they can, but I don't know if you've tried to watch it on NFL.com, but it's awful. It's like you can't choose like when to cut. They cut it up based in angles. So if like, unless it's changed, I don't know. But
well, the new I was talking to someone and they said who was it? But they said that it's going to be new. The next gen stats and everything is coming out with the new all 22. That's supposed to be really, really good, and it's partnered with the NFL. So hopefully it changes. I want to say he's a big time content creator. What's his name?
Voch, maybe. Voch Lombardi, maybe.
Nah, that doesn't ring a bell.
Anyways, I like. Oh, you're saying like Alex Rollins or one of those guys, maybe.
Yeah, I think it was Coleman. I think he talked Coleman. About he was because he works with the Chargers, doesn't he?
I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, he works for the Chargers. He does like content stuff, video stuff for them, and he ended up tweeting out that he got to look at it and see how it looks, and he says it looks phenomenal. And I was talking to someone about it, and I was like, "That's much better because we have to." I don't get my film my all-22 through NFL Network or anything like that.
Terrible.
I outsourced it from other spots, so it's like if it's nice, I wouldn't mind paying the price and allowing people to use my account to get it.
Yeah, I mean so you can, but it's chopped up by camera angle and like going and rewinding is a pain. What I'm able to see, luckily enough, is, and you're able to as well, is like it's literally play by play, one right after the other. You can pause it, rewind it. It's flawless. And then it shows you all camera angles of that play before moving on to the next play. I love that. So that's what I prefer. And then also, I don't know about you, JC, maybe you got something different going on than what I do, but it seems to me like getting your hands on college all 22 is like you got to like commit crimes or something to make that happen. I don't know. Like it's very hard to make happen.
Not saying I commit crimes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've got it, you know what I mean? But it seems like I've had actually, you'd be surprised some of the people that have slid into my DMs for college 22. And I'm like, you don't have it? Like you are a big time film guy and talk a lot about prospects. That's wild to me that you don't have it. So that just tells me that it's hard to get. So I don't know, but
Rich says he's seen the new version of it. And he says it's essentially the same thing. He said I've seen it. The angles are the same. It's the interface and features are new. You'll be able to sort plays by a number of different stats and functions. So, for example, if you want to find an exact play instead of watching the entire game or going through it, you could just go find that exact play.
So you can say, just show me all the throws type of thing.
Yeah, probably.
But see, the frustration is if it's like all the throws and it just shows an angle, and then you got to pull up another piece to see the other angle. Like that's where the marrying becomes an issue. So I don't know. Daza says, now that we extended JJ, where does Pearsall fit? Or are we trading BA or Debo? Sitting a first rounder seems like a waste. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's a path for Pearsall other than injury to get a lot of running time this year. And that's just the reality is they drafted him for the future. And that was kind of my gripe is, again, for a guy that is as polished as him, you would assume that you want him to play now, but that's may not necessarily be the case. And then he's going to be really old by the time that you go to sign the second contract. So it's like, it seems like the timeline and his age and fit, it's just not a perfect marriage for him to flourish as a player. And I do think he's a good player. I just don't know that you're going to see the best of him here for very long because of all the roadblocks that are there, but we'll see.
Or the Niners get ahead of the curve and extend him early.
Oh, there we go. Like extend him now. Just give him a 2-year extension right now so that you can play until he's 30. Keith says, I thought the roster 2 years ago was better. I would not have given up our depth on defense to get Hargrove. I love that how the mainstays in this chat know to call him Jerome Hargrove. I love it. Brian says, imagine how the O linemen feel about hearing Forrester at the presser. Yeah, man, that was interesting. And then I got you already, Steve-O. I don't know what happened there, bud, but I'm gonna check after and make sure that you're not blocked on my end. Okay, first of all, that went way longer than it should have. Sorry, Marco, for keeping you, but that was good conversation. That was a lot of fun. I'm sure the chat enjoys an extra long show. Appreciate y'all. Rich, thank you for tapping in. Everybody else that was in the chat, giving supers and just being intelligent and having good conversation. Appreciate you as well. I probably won't be back before Monday unless some breaking news happens. I hope everybody has a blessed weekend. Marco, you have a good weekend. Until Monday, peace.